Hey, everybody, welcome back. Thank you for being here. Happy Easter to all of those that celebrate. From what I read, today is actually the day. Today's actually not the day when you're supposed to be celebrating for real, but to those who celebrate, happy Easter to you, regardless. And thank you for being here. We're going to talk about this here in just a few minutes. Say goodbye to Boston Market, another restaurant chain that's on its last legs. In fact, I was shocked at the number of locations that are actually remaining. They just closed one down, one city over from where I live. They closed one down over in El Cajon, California. I'm going to talk about that. We're going to tie that in with the broader economy, but thank you for being here, and I hope everyone is doing well. Back with another dose. Let's just talk about things that are happening in what I think is going to be sure to happen this year, 2024. We're seeing the markets melt up as predicted. Again, the stock market is not an indicator of the wellness of the average U.S. consumer. In fact, it's just the inverse. The more people go into debt, consumers, you and I, the better Wall Street does. Why? Because most people are out spending their money that ends up at these top corporations that are traded on the stock market. Right? It's no longer you're buying something from the neighbor down the street or Joe, across the block. It's these big mega corporations that don't pretty much run most of the commerce now. And I talked about in one of our previous reports that even when the stimulus checks were given out, and we looked at a chart of the wealth of the top 1%, starting in 2020, the growth of the top 1%'s wealth went from this to starting in 2020. All the money that was pumped out into the economy to supposedly help people ended up in the hands of the top 1%, right? So no matter what you look at it, more money creation, even though it's guised as putting out there to help people or help the consumer, it ends up making the wealthy even wealthier, right? So we see that that's how this game of money ends up playing out, right? So I think most of you know that here. Most of the general public still has no idea. They think that these programs that are put out there and these handouts that are given to people, they think that that's actually meant to help people, right? If those things were meant to help people, then why are we in the same position now than we were in 2020 before a lot of these programs even came out, right? In fact, people are in more debt now. Cost of living is even higher than it was back then, and not just since 2020. You can go back decades, and you can see the deterioration across the different decades, right? Across that time frame. The reason I mentioned 2020 is because since 2020, it really exploded and took off exponentially, and it caused a lot more people to actually open their eyes and figure out what's going on. But just let's take a step back here and think about what's been coming out in the news lately. We have big news out of the entertainment world, right? Rappers, musicians, kind of the tip of the iceberg or the main focus right now, but there's a lot behind it that I think you're going to be shocked. Now, remember back a few years ago, I started talking about how we're going to start seeing shocking news come out. I thought all this was going to come out a long time ago. Hopefully it will come out this year. Now, there's ideas and theories out there that what's happening right now is actually not revealing anything. It's actually part of a cover-up, right? So there's people out there saying the ones supposedly investigating this right now are in on the cover-up, and that they're just going to get all the evidence and keep it hidden, and that nobody's going to get in trouble, right? That's, to me, that's the worst case scenario. I don't necessarily believe that, but it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't shock me, considering just how crooked everything has become, from our law enforcement agencies to our politicians. It's just off the charts, folks. So I would urge caution right now. The melt up that we're seeing in a lot of different investments in the stock market, we're seeing this. No bad news is bad, and the markets just keep going higher. This usually, historically, this leads up to a big shock, surprise, and then a market collapse, right? I'm not saying it's going to happen this time, but if you look back at history, usually before the big downturn, there's some sort of euphoria that's pushing the markets higher. And one of the big things has been AI. I think that's been put out there as kind of the cause or the reason for this market mania that we've been seeing, and the market's just taken off no matter what. Bridge collapse doesn't matter. Supply chain, another supply chain shock doesn't matter. U.S. consumers in record amounts of debt, delinquencies rising in car loans, mortgages, credit card payments, delinquencies exploding higher, and a lot of those on pace now with what we saw before the 2007, 2008 great financial crisis. But yet, instead of reacting in a cautious manner or reacting in a let's be careful manner, the markets are exploding higher, right? So is this a pump before the big drop, before a lot of shocking news comes out? Again, with the people in the entertainment industry, how high does this go? Does it go up to a lot of CEOs, a lot of people in the entertainment industry, the music industry, politicians, right? How high does this go? Or is this all a big cover up? There's some people out there saying that. I mean, please let me know what you think down in comments, which direction this goes. And, bottom line is to be aware of it and be ready for it. I've got some investments that I got into a few years ago. They're exploding right now. I got a digital currency that I got into, average of about 7.5 cents. It now just hit 22 cents, right? So it tripled. And as I mentioned, right when it started taking off, at that time I took 10% off. I just took another 10% off. Probably should have taken more off, because I see this market melt up and this price explosion higher right now as I think something that's going to be used to take people's wealth. I think there's a lot of big money pumping up these assets right now, and they're going to sell right before some big news drops or right before they plan on pulling the plug on these markets. When I say they, I'm talking about the top 10% that own about 90% of all stocks in the world. All right. So when they get together and decide to sell, that's when the market's going to come down, folks. And will they decide to pull the plug with a certain piece of news that comes out? Right. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Or will no news, no bad news is bad news? It's just going to keep going up no matter what, because it's an election year. There's so many theories out there, and on what's happening right now, it's really, really hard to try to navigate it. But here's what I'm doing. I'm not saying you should do this. What I'm doing is I'm holding cash still, and especially as markets keep getting pumped up higher, I'm taking gains. I'll never be completely out of the markets. I'm always going to have some invested in the markets. So there's always going to be some loss if we do see a big market correction from the way I do things. But as long as you're taking some gains on the way up, at least you can get out of it with some gains, and there's nothing wrong with taking gains. And then if you do end up taking a loss, remember, it's just a paper loss until you actually sell. If you wait until a major correction or crash and then you sell, then you've realized your losses, right? But if you never sell, if you just wait, and then if you do see a correction, then you come in and buy more, then you're just adding on top of your adding more to your position. But then as long as you've taken some gains on the way up, you're still going to have, that cash set aside waiting for the correction, right? So to me, you can't lose if you just do that particular strategy. And that's the way I've done it for a long time. And it's taken a while for some of my investments to go positive using that type of investment manner. But it's made it to where I rarely lose money. And for those that are trading, like every 2 days buying and selling stocks, it's much more difficult to make gains when you're buying and selling so frequently. Like a lot of day traders, you probably read the statistics that was it 8 or 9 out of 10 day traders end up losing money because they don't have patience, right? So to me, that's one of the big keys of this whole thing is be patient. All right, but let's talk about Boston Market. Boston Market on its last leg. And I've always thought it was a cool restaurant because it was kind of a step above fast food, but it wasn't, you know, you think of maybe a nicer restaurant. Um, it wasn't Olive Garden, right? Of course, there's much nicer restaurants than Olive Garden, but fast food versus, Olive Garden, two kind of different sides of the spectrum. Boston Market kind of somewhere in between. It was more of like to me, like of a home cooked meal, like Thanksgiving. It was Thanksgiving every day. It seems like at Boston Market, you can get turkey, you can get rotisserie chicken, you can get the cornbread, very good. I'm a big fan of the cornbread. So to me, this is kind of sad news. Boston Market is now in its last legs. Boston Market is down to 27 restaurants. Wow. And this is a sign. This is a sign I think people are downsizing. You think that on one hand, and on the other hand, you go to more expensive restaurants and it's still packed and lines outside the door. So it's interesting just trying to figure this whole thing out as far as consumer spending and where consumers are spending, where they're cutting back. Well, why would they be cutting back so much on Boston Market, especially when you see McDonald's and some of these fast food menu prices, exploding a lot higher as well, along with inflation. Let me bring this up here. 27 locations. The question I wanted to look into, though, was how many did they have? How many locations did they have? A federal judge court on Friday terminated Boston Market owner Jay Hanya's second personal bankruptcy filing over technical issues. Okay, they had about 300 locations. What is this saying? The company began in 2023 with about 300 locations. I think they got the year wrong there. It's been around more than a year. Maybe they meant to put 1993, maybe 83. Estimates on how many locations have closed vary. Restaurant Business sister company Technomic said the brand operated as few as 79 locations as of early January. Well, this headline says 27. Yeah, continued to close. 27 locations. Several employees confirmed the number. Anyways, another one bites the dust, folks. And, what's your theory? If it's not the consumer's lack of spending power, then what is it? Is something wrong with the food? Did they have a rat infestation that I didn't hear about? I didn't hear about any of that. I just think it's the consumer is being more choosy right now and where they spend their money, right? So pretty interesting times. But let's get into some other news here. And I wanted to talk about something I've been reading about. A lot of people are under the opinion that this bridge shipping location there in Maryland was a hack, right? We saw the power go out on the ship. There's a lot of people out there thinking that even the government was behind it as a excuse for the inflation that we're about to see. Now, of course, this supply chain issue could really make inflation even worse than it already is. But even before this, we started to see inflation ticking back up. So a lot of people are speculating that this was done in order to kind of cover up the underlying inflation that was already happening, and that's going to actually explode higher. Even without this happening, without this bridge event, cargo ship event was going to start exploding higher anyways. Well, now they can just point to this. I'm talking about the talking heads, the central bank, Jay Powell and company. Now they can just point to this and say, yeah, everything was fine. We were getting ready to cut rates because inflation was coming down. We were succeeding. And then all of a sudden this event happened. And now, we've got to keep rates high. We can't cut rates because inflation's exploding higher. So I think that's a very likely scenario. Crazier things have happened. It really wouldn't shock me, would not surprise me much at all. And it is pretty concerning that inflation has been ticking back up, even without rate cuts, even while rates are still where they're at. And now we've got this possible supply chain shock on top of that, right? So get ready, folks, because, that is something very concerning to me. We've got society with big problems right now. We've got the nation being flooded with people that are going to need food. They're going to need shelter. And we're already seeing the cost of food and shelter elevated. What's this going to do to the overall costs that people have to contend with? Not much more credit is available right now when it comes to credit cards. I mean, people have so much debt, they're having a hard time repaying the debt as is. So will banks just continue to increase these credit ceilings to allow people to run up more and more debt, or is there a limit somewhere? We continue to ask that question because we've yet to see the banks really pull back on the credit being issued. As soon as they do, if and when they do, folks, the economy is in big trouble. You're going to see job losses explode higher. Why? Because your spending and consumer spending in general is someone else's job, right? The debt that you take on, the money you spend, is someone else's job, right? Your spending is someone else's income, in other words, right? That's how the economy operates. And that doesn't count all the other money that's pumped out there and all the rescue programs and handouts, but that's a big part of it, folks. Consumer is the backbone of the economy, and the backbone of the consumer is borrowed money, folks. So it's about ready to get real this year. And we're going to find out shortly if these stories that have been hitting the news are actually something, if there's something behind it, or is it another cover-up, like we had talked about a few minutes ago in this video. Also, another very popular brand that's out there sounding the alarm is Tupperware. Tupperware warning that it could possibly be facing a liquidity crisis. I think just another sign that underpins, that people are cutting back on the spending, right? And Tupperware seems to last a pretty long time. It's surprising that they haven't had a big pullback in demand anyways, because once you buy Tupperware, sometimes you're good for years. You don't need to rebuy it. But anyways, that's just another small sign of, I think, bigger and more frightening things to come, folks. So hope you're doing well. Please let me know what you think about all this down in comments. Are we going to see 2024 with a big market downturn unfold? We're talking about falling stock prices, or no matter what bad news comes out, are the mega rich that own most of the stocks are just going to keep this market higher and going even higher? It's going to be a very interesting year, folks, because so many things are being revealed and coming to light, but at the same time, when there's so much control in just the hands of a few, it ultimately ends up being in the hands of a few as far as what happens, right? Or will some of the few, and maybe a lot of the few that own most of the wealth in the country, we looked at the chart last video, and it's what, $44 trillion owned now by the top 1%, are some of those individuals in that particular group going to be facing some sort of consequences with some of the craziness that they've been participating in, right? It's so bad that I can't even really say what it is, but I think probably most of you, 99% of you out there, know exactly what I'm talking about. Just crimes upon crimes upon crimes. And, so will that be the plug that gets pulled, or the rug that gets pulled out, rather, from this house of cards, where even all this wealth is concentrated at the top? They're not going to be able to keep the house of cards stacked any longer. It's coming down, because what's going to happen this year, the news, the information coming out, it's going to be so huge, it's going to net, some people in that very top group of wealthy individuals, right? Deep, folks, deep. Please let me know what you think about all this down in the comments. My head's just spinning just thinking about all the possibilities, but hope you guys are well. Anyways, again, happy Easter to those that celebrate. Keep stacking, folks. We'll see you here on the next video. Please like, subscribe, and share these videos if you like what we talk about here. And we'll see you next time again, everybody. Peace.